All right. Well, welcome to the TVI podcast, and we are back again with another episode for you guys. We've been on a little hiatus, had some technical difficulties, but now we're back. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I'm Jamal,
And I'm Justin from Richmond.
and we're here to give you all the latest and greatest on government, politics, and what adjacent,
And
everything
stuff.
adjacent
We
news.
do all the things here.
The things we do, all the things. So, Justin, I think I got a couple things that I think I wanted to kind of just touch on briefly.
hmm
I know you had a couple things as well. We kind of try to bring you guys kind of the latest things that maybe you may not have heard about, or maybe you have, and we have a unique opinion on them. So, Justin, I don't know, man. Do you want to go first?
No, I kicked it off last. Oh wait, did I kick it off? No, you go for it,
All
man.
right, all
Cause I
right. I'll
mean,
go kick it off.
my little bit is brief. You're not gonna talk about Egypt, are you?
Well, no.
Oh, okay. All right, bet. Yeah, we good. You're not gonna steal my thunder.
so
Go ahead and
so
kick us
no,
off,
no.
man.
But I did want to. Let's start off with a finance tip because I have a finance and
Oh yeah, yeah.
background, and so you may have heard, or maybe you didn't hear, that um, there was a motion submitted to the Supreme Court to dissolve the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That was one of Elizabeth Warren's kind of key pieces of legislation. It was a hallmark piece of legislation for her, and really put in things that, frankly, I think have been beneficial for the average consumer. It's really good for, I think, consumer bankers, individuals who are, looking for, who need kind of that protection and that sort of that government backing for their individual kind of banking situation. It hasn't really been good for businesses. There's a lot of, it imposes a lot of restrictions, but it does provide a way for consumers to kind of light a fire underneath banks that aren't doing what they should be doing. So, um, a traditionally conservative justice, Clarence Thomas, actually split with his conservative fellows to bring the vote 7-2 to keep the bureau, which I think has a lot of consumers breathing a sigh of relief. So that was a thing that really happened. Had you heard about that at all?
Nope, not at all. Well, as soon as you started talking about finance, the first thing I thought about was the doom and gloom I've been sharing with people lately. I'm like, I know they're trying to tell y'all some rosy numbers and all that stuff, but I mean, let's be honest here. It wouldn't be the first time that the media has chosen what kind of stories it's going to run, particularly in a presidential election year, especially when the race is expected to be tight. Now, don't get me wrong; they're usually going to be relatively close, but over the past 8 years, the elections have been especially close.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been telling people that I strongly believe that by the end of this year, we'll be finding ourselves in a recession, despite the little pretty numbers they're putting out there, and like what I've noticed out on the scene. Because as you know, but maybe the listeners don't, I do operate a small business in the food produce space. And it's always a really good indicator when you can tell what people are buying, particularly when it comes to necessities, the commodities, food, things like that.
Yeah.
And across the board, I'm at 5 different markets. Across the board, there has been a contraction in the general sales and revenue and things like that for a lot of producers. So that's letting me know that people are really feeling the pinch between inflation and just the general rising cost of living. That the absolutely insane housing market right now,
Hmm.
and so this to me signals that we are definitely on a downward slide because I mean, in our space, especially in a more niche space like I am, having seen consistent growth over 3 years now, suddenly to see things drop off is really alarming.
Yeah, I think inflation is still a thing. I think the Fed agrees with you. People had anticipated rate cuts this summer, going into the fall, and all indicators point to the fact that the Fed is not going to budge on that. And so that lets us know that the interest, not the interest rate risk, the inflation risk, and the inflation problem is still a thing. So it's still prevalent enough to where the Fed's like, no, we're not cutting rates right now. We're just gonna kind of maintain where we are. I think two other interesting things that you mentioned. One was housing, right? So there's a couple of houses for sale in the neighborhood where I'm at, and they're they've just been sitting, man. Inventory has been sitting. I think that there's been a couple price reductions on a lot of the houses around here. So for first time home buyers, they're going to be excited because they're going to be like, yay, home prices are coming down. We might be able to afford a house at some point. You know what I mean? Um, and I've frankly, I've just been shocked. There's a house like right like adjacent from me, kind of diagonally across the street. It's a really nice house, and I thought for sure that one would move fast, but it's been sitting there for months now. So that's something that to really think about, right? So inventory is going up. That's going to cause prices to go down. So that's good news in one sense, and not so good news in another sense because that means inflation is a thing. Talking about inflation, though, there's been some. I read an article around things that have gone up, but aren't necessarily connected to inflation. And I think one of the things that we've seen that has skyrocketed in price, I'll say skyrocket. That might be a little dramatic, but it serves my purpose. Insurance. The cost of auto insurance and homeowners insurance has gone up two orders of magnitude since 2021. There's even the article even mentioned that a lot of insurance carriers, it's particularly those who provide homeowners or property insurance, are using drones to overfly your property to look for um, anything that they might consider to be risky. So large amounts of firewood, oil, gas storage, old roofs, unpermitted structures, things like that. Um, and they're dropping people. They're dropping people left and right. I know for me, my auto insurance has gone up more than I would like to, because I was like, damn, why is this expensive? Like 3 or 4 years ago, I was paying like $80 for two cars, and now it's like $200. So
My aunt's
hey,
house insurance is quadrupled. She's dropping it actually. She said it
yeah,
went from like 1,000 to $4,000. She said nope.
it's crazy. This first kind of started in California and Florida because they were saying, well, out in California, you got wildfires, earthquakes, that sort of thing. It's getting expensive. You know what I mean? And then so on the one hand, you kind of say, okay, well maybe that makes sense, but then Florida is saying, well, hurricanes are ripping roofs off houses, and we have to account for this. But then you've got your run of the mill people who are just like, I've been living in this house for 20 years and I haven't had a problem, and they're like, well, your roof's old, so you've got 30 days to replace that, or we're dropping you, and we're
Yeah,
raising your premiums.
it's gonna push. And I mean like that, like listening to that, and then people that may not be able to afford insurance when their houses face some sort of issue and has to be destroyed. It's gonna inevitably get bought up by some megacorp. Like for instance, KBS owns a great deal of real estate. I think they're the largest holder of real estate, of residential real estate in the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
And like companies like that are going to swoop in and buy up these houses, and of course keep the market where it is. And it's basically going to create a situation where everybody, and well, I won't say everybody, but a lot more people are going to be renting in 20, 30 years. Like I'm talking like in a truly disproportionate sort of way. And that's 20, 30 years, even though the trend has been moving towards renting more and more over the past couple of decades. I think we're going to see an exponential jump over the next couple of decades as people just simply get priced out of things. What I also found interesting is that I was listening to an article, I think it was on NPR. They're talking about like, I can't remember the exact housing market, but there are markets where there are like 13, 14 people bidding on a single home. And you're going to have to put out your best offer first. There's no more lowballing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder to myself, how much is this people? And I'm sorry, let me back up. And so that's why some people are saying, oh, there's a housing crisis because in these certain markets, people are having to bid over the same home. I'm starting to wonder, especially with the statistics saying that there's enough vacant homes right now to house several 100,000 unhoused people at this moment. If we just wanted to stick them in a home, then there are that many vacant homes. So I'm wondering how much of this is people just wanting what they want and trying to get their unicorn, as opposed to settling for what they can actually afford and maintain.
Yeah,
I,
I think
I
it's
get that we want to jump to the front and get everything straight off rip, but there is a process to this, and it kind of goes back to what a real estate guy that I know. When I did HVAC at his home, a few years ago, we were just chit chatting. He's like, "You seem like a smart guy. Let me give you, let me talk to you a little bit." So we started yip yapping about financial stuff, and he's like, "Do you own a house?" Yeah, I said, "No, I don't." And so he gave me. He's like, "This is what I did, and this is what you need to do." He said, "Just go out and Goochland, where the property taxes are low. Get yourself a little ratty trailer on a few acres, pay that down for a couple of years, and then slowly upgrade and keep those homes." And rent those out, and you'll eventually build what I built myself, because that's how he did it. And
hmm
so I'm wondering how many people are just trying to go for that white picket fence and double decker home with a nice basement right off rip, and not really try and work the process.
I think they're actually settling, to be quite honest with you. I mean, with the increase in interest rates, dude, compared to 2018, 2019, part of it, I mean, interest rates have doubled. So the mortgage payments have doubled. So if you were barely fitting it in before, you're definitely not fitting it in now. And so I think the problem with it is, I think corporate ownership of single family homes is problematic, only in that you have to you have to keep the rents affordable, right? And so what does that mean, affordable? That's a question. The second question is, um, at what point do you get the kind of return on the property that you initially expect? So you've got these big, like you mentioned, KBS is holding all this real estate. How do you get the return from it that you expect to get? Um, because number one, you've got repairs. Number two, you've got vacancy, right? Vacancy is a huge issue, because if nobody's renting that, then that house is doing nothing for you except costing you money, right? And I think it will get to a point where it becomes a little bit untenable. And I think that some companies are there, like Redfin and Zillow. I think they've kind of started to divest themselves of single family real estate. Multifamily real estate, however, is an investor's dream. So a lot of cities have started to indicate that they would like to have high density residential housing situations. And so it's going to be nothing to see. And you'll see it like here in Richmond, they're popping them up 250, 150 to 200 to 300 unit buildings are going up all over the place.
I just saw a picture of it today, or it could have been yesterday, but I just thought it was a propos. There's an actual building in China. It's an apartment building and houses 30,000 people.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like
That place, I
that
want to
blows
go
my
there.
mind. Now looking at it, it looks like as literally a Spartan and a steer, and it's literally just concrete squares that are making up these homes. But it is housing. It's
Yeah.
solid. It's warm in the winter. It's cool in the summer.
I want to go there. I mean, can you imagine? Like, this is a whole closed, um, I don't want to say biosphere, that's wrong, but it's its own sort of ecosystem, I guess maybe is the word, an
Mm.
appropriate word. They have everything there: doctors, dentists, lawyers, all in this huge building place.
Yeah, I mean, well, just I mean, it sounds like they just kind of created like a little mini town, but like on like a block.
Yeah, I it's
So it's
it's
like,
I've seen some pictures of it and some video, and it looks like the kind of place I would like to visit, but I definitely don't want to live there. Definitely don't want to live there. But yeah, just some things to keep, to be cognizant of on the financial kind of front. There, I think you're right. Things are going to tighten up as we get into the fall, um, and heading into the winter as well. So put some acorns away.
yeah, but not the app until they sponsor us. That's why I poured my rehydrating beverage into this cup because I'm like, nobody's getting free advertising if I drink some on the video. Nobody. Better slide me some
There you
free
go.
drinks or something when I visit your convenience store. So,
So,
um,
uh,
well, the only thing I was going to touch on is going to take us outside of the U.S., and that's because I love my international conflicts and stuff like that, and talking about those. And this can quickly snowball, so I'm going to try and try and streamline this. But interestingly, people were talking about. Well, let me phrase that. It's not as interestingly, but as we all pretty much heard, about 45 people were killed recently in the southern city of Rafah by Israeli defense forces. Not very defensive, is that? And it was mostly and most of the people that perished were in basically a tent city, and roughly half of the people that perished were also women and children. But also, later on, just shortly thereafter, there was a skirmish at the southern border that Israel or Gaza, however you want to look at that, or Palestine, since that's the actual whole entire country. We can get into that one in a second. Um, that there was apparently a fight between fighters and IDF right there on the border, and somehow Egyptians got involved, and an Egyptian soldier was killed while exchanging fire with IDF forces. Of course, the only source I've seen that even talked about it much, of course, was from the Tel Aviv side. So they said, well, our scuttlebutt is that the Egyptians started it. I don't know. We'll see. But I thought it was very interesting that Benjamin Netanyahu said that the killing of the 40 something civilians was a tragic mistake because he doesn't really say much about mistakes when it comes to anything that involves killing Palestinians, who are, by the way, the indigenous people of that land. It was after World War II that the West moved all the Jewish people, resettled them in the country of Palestine, and where they carved out the Israeli state. But colonize is going to colonize. But that's another podcast.
yeah, I did not know. I didn't hear about the Egyptian that skirmish with Egypt.
They
That's
claim there's a dialogue going on with the Egyptian government and
I
whatnot.
bet
But
there is. I bet there is because that's problematic to say the least. Because if you, if Jesus, if I'm Israel, the fewer countries that get involved with this, the better. Everything's pretty much. I mean, I don't want to sound, kind of arrogant in saying this, but for the most part, there's the correct amount of tension in the Middle East to where everybody's kind of just like, let's just mind our business. Outside of, of course, outside of Iran and that whole thing. Um, I don't think we touched on the podcast about the recent death of the Iranian president um, in a
yeah, we
helicopter
we
crash.
did on the podcast we couldn't
Oh,
load
okay,
up.
okay.
We
So
touched
the
on that a little bit. Yeah,
for those who don't know, the Iranian president died in a helicopter crash. I believe was it in the northern part of the country, the more mountainous
correct.
area.
Yeah, northern part of the country, mountainous, cold region.
And so people are just like, oh, did it crash? Or you break out the conspiracy theories. I don't know, but this is kind of like the wrong time for something like this to happen, right? I mean, can you crash that when things are just not going on with Israel? I don't know what will become of it, right? Because the Iranian president is not really the head of the country, right? It's the supreme leader that's the head of the country. So I mean, he's a figurehead, right? He has he holds an important office, but I don't think if it was not an accident, I don't think you've changed much by doing that. Um,
No, it doesn't appear there's going to be any real instability that's caused by it.
no, and so you kind of just look at it. I know that the UN had officially ordered, and ordered is the word that the media used. It was probably more like a request, but it said that the UN has ordered Israel to halt its military operations in and around Rafah, and not to proceed any further. I mean, I don't see it happening. I mean,
Well, I
But
mean,
we'll see now.
they told them this. Well, I mean, they had already placed that order about 2 or 3 days before the bombing of that tent city. It's just
Well,
renewing the calls now, and it's also emboldening countries like Spain and Norway to recognize the Palestinian state, which they should.
yeah, I did see that. I think that um, the I did read somewhere that there was some rocket attacks in the last couple of days that may have preceded this from Hamas and out of the city of Rafah. So I'm just like, I don't
Yep.
know. That seems
Well, actually, I'm not
counterproductive.
sure if it was out of. Well, actually, yeah, it did say it was out of Rafah. Yeah, it did. Mhm.
So I don't. That seems counterproductive on Hamas's part. I mean, you already have somebody at the gates that really wants to burn it down, and it's really only international pressure at this point that's kind of like causing them to slow down. But I'm of the opinion that Israel's not going to be satiated until they burn it all down. I think that given the givens, I think they're committed to quote unquote finishing the job. And I don't
Which
think
they
this.
can't do because you
Well,
can't defeat an ideology.
well, you can't.
They've gotten their pound of flesh, plus a dozen more. It's time for
Yeah,
them to stop.
it is. I agree with you. I just don't think they're going to.
No, they're not.
Yeah, I just don't think they're going to. In all honesty, I am. I do think that true peace will involve a two-state solution. And so I'm glad to see that the two-state solution has is gaining international support. Um, I think that this will work against the Democrats in this year's election, um, but will only time will tell. Only time will truly tell. But this whole thing with Egypt is a little bit troubling because you really, if you're Israel, you really want the Egyptians to just stay out of
It keeps
it.
getting mentioned as an aside. Like I actually had to go look up the article because I just heard about it on the tail end of a couple of audio like art, like news things I was listening to. I
Yeah.
don't really watch a lot of news, but I listen to it a lot throughout the day.
Hmm.
And I was like that. I mean, I guess there's like whatever. It's just one dead Egyptian dude, but like it's significant because it was an Israeli bullet that caused the death of said dude, and like Egypt and Israel have always had a very uneasy peace.
Yeah.
So like I'm surprised. I mean, it's not the first time there's been clashes like this at the border, based upon what little bit was mentioned on that, but I don't know to what extent. But I definitely thought it was very significant, and yeah. Guess we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, nobody's really trying to run up on Israel anyway, since they're the only truly nuclear nation in the Middle East. Even though Iran has recently insinuated that they have the capability of building a bomb at any point they want to, and have even very ambiguously suggested they may even already have one.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think
which
so.
I mean, maybe so. I mean, Israel in particular has been very heavy-handed in terms of assassinating their scientists and anyone involved in their nuclear programs. But I'm sure they had several levels to it, and they were able to keep things moving along. Plus what was the name of that virus that the U.S. unleashed on Iran to
What
break
was it?
down their
Starts
well,
with an
whatever that
H.
was.
Huxnet, something like that.
Yeah, it was
Um,
something, and I mean they've since recovered and managed most of that. So, but I
yeah,
don't know what else they have
I'm
going
of
on.
the opinion they've got something. It may not be on the same scale or quantity or quality of Israel, but I think they got something. Um, and so I'm hopeful that people will conduct themselves accordingly. It's, I mean, I think it's the nuclear program has been a top priority for Iran for a long time, but all the Western media has been saying, "Oh, every time you hear about it, oh, they're only 6 months away," and from the last 25 years. I mean, either they're 6 months away, or they got it. They got it, or they don't got it.
Yeah, they've
And
been close for a long time.
yeah, I think somebody's done something. Um, so we'll see, man. I am just keeping an eye on things. Just keeping an eye on things. But I think was there a domestic issue that we wanted to touch on? I'm just
Well,
trying to
the
think.
housing thing was the only thing I had immediately on my mind. we touched on the protests a bit during the podcast, so we weren't able to get uploaded. Did you get on YouTube? I think you said you
Um,
were able to get on YouTube, weren't you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So these episodes will start going on YouTube as well as Spotify.
Yeah, so
Um,
check us out there. Just want to make sure we get that part in there.
that's right at the Black
See,
Ink Bandits.
any other domestic issues? Oh, I did hear about one thing earlier today while you try and jog whatever may have been was the other thing you wanted to talk about, if that was the case. Have you heard about the shortage of firefighters, particularly the elite kind that go into these wilderness fires in the Northwest or in the western part of the U.S. that are that are particularly out of hand and really aggressive? And okay, so apparently there's like a shortage of 25% of these firefighters, what we call hot shots. Those are like your special forces of firefighters.
Hmm.
And it's short enough that it's a possibility we would even have to borrow crews if available from Canada and Mexico, which of course is a whole another logistical and communication nightmare.
I thought
Part of
most of the wildfires were in Canada.
part of them, well, the ones that have been going on during the off season, yes, those are in Canada, but we're getting to our season, and so maybe they can spare those crews, maybe they can't. But our problem is that we're also not paying these guys really well because they happen to be in parts of the country where the cost of living is extraordinarily high, but they're still being paid based upon a median salary. So even some of the upper level people have said that some of their firefighters, just in order to do this job they're truly dedicated to, are forced to live in their vehicles or simply not do the job at all because in this and apparently there has been a bill put forward through the, I want to say it was the Biden administration that tried to put it forward to increase their pay and benefits to make it a little bit easier to actually get these people in these vital roles, and it's been getting stalled in Congress. I would love to do some more digging on that and find out why this, because it seems, I mean, this is a national security issue. Any other time, that's, it's we're more than happy to throw money into the incinerator for that. So, whose house has to get threatened before it becomes an issue, apparently, is what it's going to come down to.
Well,
It just blows my mind, the kind of stuff the level of risk that we try to take just to save a dollar while literally burning it or sending it to other countries that won't even properly defend themselves, like
there you go.
Ukraine. Because I do want to touch on that real quick. While I said I wasn't going to have a
No,
tangent,
go
I'm going
ahead,
to
man.
try and get
Because
a quick one in, a quick
no,
one.
go ahead. Because I was gonna do it. So go ahead.
Because
Go
I
ahead.
recently, because I mean, like at the beginning of the show, and I had my little podcast. I don't remember which one it was that had the name for it, but like, I mean, I was super hawkish about supporting Ukraine. Let's go whoop some Russian ass. I don't care what they threaten to do; they're not going to do anything anyway.
Right.
So, like, but here's the problem. Um, I mentioned it previously that Volodymyr Zelensky only recently lowered the draft age from 27 down to 25. This You're telling me you've lost like a third of your country now, and you're losing more steadily as the Russians are pushing in from the north, and you may lose your second most important city in Kharkiv up there on the northern border. I think it's only like 30, 45 miles away from the Russian border. But you're not mobilizing lottie-dottie everybody.
Hmm.
Man, I'm like, Mom, you can pull the trigger, right? Like
I,
somebody, like, you're defending your livelihood, your country, your lives are literally at stake, and you are still pussyfooting around, and you're expecting everybody else to pick up the slack for you. Nah, homie, drop that age to 18, remove the gender restrictions, and let's get busy. That's what you need to do if you
well,
really want to win this war.
well,
Either
I
that
think
or sue for peace, accept the loss of the secede, allow cede that land to Russia so they can have a little buffer zone, and let's just stop the bullshit and let's fix our domestic issues here.
I think you are almost 100% on that. I
Well, what's the almost? What's the almost,
Well,
Jamal? What
all
did
right.
I
So
miss?
the man in me really doesn't like the idea of women in combat, especially frontline combat. However, I do have to concede that in this age of equality, all things being equal, and I mean Israel does this too, which is all of their citizens
Mm-hmm.
have to, with the exception of I think the cleric class or the clergy class, have to serve at least 2 years in the army,
Yeah.
male and female.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just, as a man, a more traditional and becoming more and more conservative by the day, I don't like the thought of women in combat. I do think that, I mean, you can lower the draft age. Certainly 21 is appropriate, and 18 isn't out of the question. I mean, you're an adult. Um, I know nobody likes the thought of really young people in combat, but this is, this is a situation of not just historic, but of the utmost importance. I think
Well, I'm
you,
not saying that females have to necessarily be infantry either, because the evidence is definitely there. You do not want, but you don't want at least mixed gender regiments.
yeah,
On the front line, there's a whole bunch of evidence and data that goes behind that. Veteran here, in case anybody was wondering, is listening to the podcast. 10 years in the army, and I was always in co-op units. Definitely would have been easier for all dudes, but I still enjoyed those the time with those units and whatnot.
yeah,
But in terms of combat, there's a lot of hangups, and part of it is because of that traditional male mindset. If the female gets injured, a whole bunch of dudes are going to get distracted because they're going to want to help the screaming chick over yonder.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and
That's just what it
that's a
is.
problem because you're no longer mission oriented at that point. You're now
Right.
focusing on your feelings.
That's
We
right.
need effect. We
That's
have a
right.
goal, and
Good
that's whoop
results.
some Russian ass and protect our home, and
And I
that's what
think
needs to be happening. They can do drone support. They can help
if if
they
you're
can
a
help
reservist,
with the logistical support,
if
anything
you're
like that. Because I mean, all phases of the Ukrainian army needs additional manpower, but none more than the front lines. And by getting in by backfilling those other people that may not be as desirable for combat, we can push those individuals that are better suited for combat to those front lines.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense, and I think, well, I will. I think Putin has dropped doesn't have these types of restrictions, if I'm right. I think if you're 18, boy, you're in there, um, or certainly 21.
Well, I mean, we know they pulled thousands of prisoners out and like, hey man, we'll give you a pardon if you go to fight. It's like
Yeah,
they're pulling out all the stops.
I think I'll be like, no, I'm good where I'm at. Let me go ahead and
I don't
serve
know,
these
man. Them
5 years
Russian
where I'm
prisons,
good.
I don't know. Combat might be better.
Listen, what I will say though is that the Ukrainians have been they've mounted really a superb defense over these last couple of years. Um, those people have fought hard against, a superpower, or what was considered a superpower, and certainly an army that has traditionally just thrown men at the problem. Right? I mean, throughout history, kind of a Russian tactic has been, well, we'll just keep sending the troops in, right? Um,
Whether they had weapons or not. They
yeah,
had actually sent waves of Russian soldiers in World War II unarmed, and when the guy with the rifle in front of you died, you picked up his rifle and you kept going.
yeah,
That's how they rolled back then. Stalin didn't play no games.
yeah. That's nuts to me. But yeah, I'll tip my hat to Ukrainian forces for their resilience, and their ability to mount an effective defense. I think that what it will end up being, all things considered, man, all this blood's going to be for nothing. I think they're going to. Um, Russia's going to keep a little bit of the territory that it's been able to claim. Certainly, Crimea. They had a naval base in Crimea. Why did anybody think that they were just going to let that go? Um, I think all things considered, things will end up being pretty much the way they were, with maybe a few minor changes. And the sad part is that all this will be for nothing. I mean, they won't. The part of the condition will be that Ukraine can't join NATO. Nothing's going to change, but all these people will have died.
Hmm.
And it's certainly for the Ukrainians, they will have died in defense of their country, which is admirable and noble. For the Russian, the average Russian infantryman, for what? For what? Just to keep Ukraine out of NATO, which I'm not saying is nothing, but just damn, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. So I'll kind of rest my piece there, man. Actually, give me like 60 seconds
I
more.
don't know. Do your thing, because we know you gotta roll in a minute anyway. So go ahead and
Yeah,
close this out, man. Do your thing.
so your girl Marjorie Taylor Greene a couple of months ago, no, about a month ago, tried to get what's his name, the Speaker of the House, Mike
Mike
Johnson,
Johnson.
tried to get him dismissed, and Democrats actually saved him. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? That now I didn't see that coming. Talk
No.
about giving her the middle
No.
finger.
No. No. That was. I wasn't terribly surprised by that because he's someone they could work with. Um. If it was somebody that was less reasonable, then Green wouldn't have a complaint. because she'd be getting her way, and there'd be a deadlock, even greater deadlock through Congress. So it was just a pragmatic move by the Dems. I mean, they definitely didn't want any more drama coming through, and the government itself to seem even more effete than it already seems to be, especially in an election year. But if they end up with a more extreme conservative, then nothing will get done,
Yeah,
and that's not going to help that's not going to help their prospects come November.
yeah. I think you're exactly right about that. I'm just so glad to see her get the proverbial middle finger. I just don't like that lady. I just don't like
Not
her.
much to like.
Yeah, I don't like her. But
I'm sure
that's just
somebody likes her. Somebody does.
yeah, Trump likes her. But yeah, that's it for me. I'm gonna turn it. Do you have anything you want to touch on before we close it out?
No, man. Check us out on the YouTubes. We're
Yep.
also on Instagram. Are we on Threads yet, Jamal?
No, no, not on
Okay,
Threads.
all right. I know you're
Instagram.
talking about Facebook, so that'll be easy to just integrate all that jazz.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, you can find me on the socials, Justin from Richmond, if you want to add me. Just know I'm at back.
You guys, you guys follow Justin, man. He's got a very interesting mind. He's got some interesting stuff that he looks at. So, if you want to take a deeper dive down the rabbit hole, Justin has got his own little rabbit hole that you can go into. I think you guys will really enjoy it. But check us out at two. That's the number two, blackpod at gmail.com. If there's any topics you want to hear us talk about or kind of go into and research, definitely let us know. Follow us on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and like Justin said, we're now on YouTube. So thanks for being here. Have a blessed and safe day. Take good care.
Peace out.